Mr. Chinabiro.
Okay.
Okay.
With respect to what I do, my role is largely a soundboard and a coordinator for risk management within the company. And that's the role for many risk professionals. Everyone, so MTN operates on a certain risk management model where they split the company into what we call first line management. We have second line management, where I fall on third line. So first line, if someone is in charge of putting up a site or running the IT network, that is first line management, the CIO, CTIO. So part and parcel of their job is risk management. My role is to ensure, one, that whatever risks he takes are within the acceptable levels that the company's board has approved to take. Secondly, is to be a sound board. If he wants to take on a certain risk, he can bounce it off me and we debate whether it is worth taking, and if we are to take it, what mitigations or protections do we put in place? So that is at a high level what I do. In terms of what it takes to do what I do, like I said, you need to be versatile, you need to be knowledgeable. So you need to read a lot. You have to be a quick learner. When I worked for Ernst & Young, every month or two, you would have a different client or customer. So these 2 months, you could be deployed to a soap manufacturer in Tanzania. The next 2 months, you're in Nigeria with an oil company. The other 2 months, you're in South Africa with a broadcasting company. For you to advise on risk, you must have a good understanding of the business, the processes, such that you can advise. Now, the only way you get that good understanding is by reading a lot, engaging the subject matter experts in the field. Then you can advise someone on the risk pertaining to their space. So it calls for a lot of agility.
Ambrose, please mute your microphone. You will unmute when time for the question and answer session comes. Same to you, Catherine and Sima. Please mute your microphones. I request you kindly. Yes, go on, Samuel. Sorry for that interruption.
Yes, so you have got to be agile. I started out in technology, like I said. My foray into technology risk advisory was because of my knowledge in technology. But technology, as you may appreciate, is fast moving. And MTN is largely, it started out as a technology company. It's a digital company now. So there's a lot of changes in technology. So what you studied on campus or the technology that was prevalent while you're studying at university may not be the technology at play 3-4 years down the road. So if you don't have that interest, that discipline, that drive to read, then you would struggle acquiring knowledge to be able to effectively advise the business or any of your clients that you might have on risk.
Okay, I have a question at this juncture, Samuel, and yes. I'm coming from the point of how you've explained to us so far. The whole idea then of risk and compliance sounds something very, very technical. And for an afternoon like this one, in an economy like this one, it may be a little more difficult to consume these technicalities without, breaking them down fast. So I'm going to just rewind us back and ask you for, if you are to, for example, exemplify, if you are to use an example, what is the simplest way you can make someone understand what risk and compliance is? For example, someone who's about 6 years old, how would they get risk and compliance the best way?
I think someone who's 6 years old shouldn't be dealing with risk or trying to manage risk. But anyway, bringing it home, and before this call, I was actually on another call with our colleagues about risk within MTN. But the most recent one was COVID, and I did an article on the same. We had COVID come around, and we needed to continue operation, which comes with certain objectives. You must continue offering communication services to the market, at the same time protecting your staff from exposure. And then before vaccination, I would call vaccination a mitigating action, which again is one form of risk management we took on. As a company, we said all our staff should get vaccinated. It's really mitigating the risk of hospitalization and unfortunately death on account of COVID infection. So that's the simplest example, or the easiest way to approach risk management, or to exemplify risk management. So we managed to protect our staff by having them work from home, okay, before vaccination. We managed to protect our customers by having this whole social distancing within our service centers. If some of you went to our service centers, you saw the plexiglasses, you saw the foot stickers, trying to emphasize the social distancing. You saw the insistence on masks and sanitizer. Those were all mitigants to risk management. We then, until we got a certain base,
Next time I'm bringing them.
You see, vaccinated. In fact, I must say, of what you would call the multinationals or blue chip companies, we are the only one, at least in Uganda, that did not lose any member of staff to COVID. Okay. The other that I can speak about that's relevant to us now is
Shalom Wahereza.
Yes, sir.
Shalom, please mute your microphone. All right.
The other that I can speak about is what we are currently grappling with, the inflation. Inflation really is the increase in the price of goods and services. So we've seen a surge in fuel inflation. The Bureau of Statistics calls it energy inflation. Everything is transported. A lot of goods are transported using diesel. In some spaces, you've seen diesel even higher than petrol. We are a landlocked country. A lot of our goods come through the coast of Mombasa and Dar es Salaam. What does that mean? If we set a budget at the end of last year that we are going to spend 1 million on fuel, and between January and April, you have a 33% rise in the price of fuel. So what do? You need to manage that risk in terms of expenditure. So there are certain things we are doing, and because most of our towers, which is a big spend item, use generators, that means an increased cost of operation whilst you're not necessarily increasing prices to your consumer who is earning the same and is being hit by the same inflationary pressures. So that's another risk I can give. And unfortunately, I cannot go into the detail of some of the efficiency programs we're running, but that's a risk that is prevalent now. And someone would have to brainstorm with management, what do we do to mitigate that risk? Compliance is one form of risk. It's just that it's so prominent. It features through in the name. So we're a law-abiding company. We are subjected to a certain license with conditions. So there are compliance requirements on account of laws in Uganda that we operate in. There are compliance requirements on account of the license, the basis of which we operate. Now, when you breach compliance requirements, then you are exposed to a compliance risk. And in most spaces and markets, when you breach compliance, you get penalized, if not being kicked out of the country. So from a risk point of view, if there is a law that we are not supposed to do X, Y, and Z, we are not supposed to sign up a customer without getting their national ID, and you don't do it, then you're exposing the company to some of the penalties and fines like happened with our sister companies, like the mainly publicized one at MTN Nigeria. So I don't know if those examples give a flavor. Last year, end of last year, MTN Uganda got listed on the Uganda Securities Exchange. There were additional compliance requirements that came with that listing. The simplest one is what we call insider trading. People who are involved in the company are only allowed to buy and sell shares within a certain period. We are required to publish our results in the newspapers. We are required to have an AGM. There's an AGM coming up. It was advertised. It's coming up on 27th. So there are compliance requirements that came up on account of MTN now listing on the Uganda Securities Exchange. But by and large, compliance is part of a wider risk universe that my team is charged with monitoring. There are other risks like political, revenue, fraud, so many other risks, and compliance is just one of those.
Okay, thank you, Samuel. Quite elaborate on the examples. I think what I gather is a risk means that something might actually go wrong, and compliance is how you keep in line with already set rules and guidelines for business. Is that something close? I'm just trying to summarize from what you got from
I think you're right. Risk is, I want to do this, what can stop me from doing it? Whilst that's all the other forms of risks. Whilst compliance is, this is the requirement, this is the potential penalty or impact. Do I want to go on with it, or do I want to dare them? A bit like taxation. The rules are set for taxation, but some people try and avoid taxes.
Okay. All right. With this background, I would ask about you when you go to work, or on a day where you've worked from home, for example. What is the best part of your job? What's that one thing that you're always looking out for?
So I guess one of the things I look out for, there are two. I work for a company that is always innovating. So we have something we call product risk or project risk. So I like it when I'm in the innovation room, when or in meetings where we are debating a product, what are the pros and cons, what do we need to do? The other side of risk that is emerging in that space is what is called articulating opportunities. You should not always look at things that can fail you. You should also look out for opportunities. For whenever there's a challenge, there's an opportunity. When we had the COVID risk, there was an opportunity for a surge in data usage. There was an opportunity for e-commerce or digital payments or Momo Pay. So yes, that is one of the things I like. And I guess the other, because part of risk management is that we monitor certain key risks. So one of the good parts is where, and we've automated some of the key risk indicator monitoring. One of the good things is when you get the dashboard and it's showing you there was no breach to SIM registration, there was no breach to money laundering, that you're not in a state of non-compliance, if I can put it that way. So those are the two that I can speak to. When you're in discussions about innovation, and when you get reports or output that shows we are in compliance of our obligations.
Okay. I want to thank the 40 participants who are still on the call with us, and I hope you're listening in carefully and preparing questions. Back to you, Samuel. You talked about the opportunity presenting itself in the shell of a challenge. Now, there is an interesting scenario playing in my head where a small startup company, for example, has done all its risk calculations, but unfortunately, some of these are breached, and some of the risks that were not anticipated manifest as very big challenges or very big problems. How would you advise such a company in such a situation where events have gone against the calculated risk?
I would say you step back. You see, for you to be able to pick up, in some cases it's quite obvious, but for you to be able to pick up on something, you've got to be monitoring it. So I would always advise that it's important to monitor. If you start your small business, look at, assess risks, like you said, you tried, but you didn't pick up some of those, or some of them are what are called force majeure. They're really out of your control, like COVID. Try and monitor. If it's not one of those big bang things where we take out insurance, that a fire has wiped away all your stock. If it's one of those that sort of emerge and escalate, put in monitoring mechanisms and say, if it gets to this point, I'm going to do this. If it gets to the other point, I'm going to do this. Even if you don't know what to do, as it escalates, you can always consult. Okay, that's assuming it's not one of those big bang, wipe out kind of things. And for those, I would say, one form of risk management is what is called risk transfer, which in common language is insurance. Insurance is largely a case of you've transferred a risk to someone that if it occurs, then that person pays. Okay, and MTN also has that. And even if your business is small, I'm involved in some, like I said, I'm a budding livestock person and a few other businesses. that's susceptible to some of those big banks. So you take insurance. Okay, you factor in insurance, but let's say it's a risk that you can monitor, you see it escalating. Put in place thresholds to intervene, even if it means shutting down that startup. Okay. If people are invested in in stocks, publicly listed companies, either here or elsewhere, oftentimes they are trends. So there could be a point where, you've tried your best, you're just going to lose more money. So you save the little you still have of the stock and you exit the stock. So even a startup, you might get to a point where you should cut your losses. It's business. I sometimes read some of Buffett's papers. There are so many businesses, he goes in and exits. You should have the strength of character to exit. So you should put in your thresholds that should it get to this, I do this. There's another business startup I was running. Should the sales transactions get to this, then I need to buy a payment system. Okay, I can no longer manually look at the book of sales and look at the receipts and things like that. If they get to this, then I need to get in a cashier. If they get to this, I need to get in an external auditor. Okay, so you sort of design thresholds through which there are risk mitigating actions. I don't know if that answers your question.
I believe so. Actually, it does, because you've mentioned one of my take homes has been risk transfer. I didn't know that there's another word to mean insurance. But when you mentioned that, I think that was a very big pick on my mind, because many times I've seen it with reputed business people and public personalities talking about how insurance can save you someday. And also,
yes,
you talked
I
about...
always actually encourage, and there are many forms. For example, I'm into agriculture, but most people don't know there's agriculture insurance. And that's one of the spaces where you can get a big hit. Just like having an accident on the road and your car is written off. So yes, sometimes it's such a token that you pay for the insurance protections, for what I call it. So risk management, you either treat, that means do an action to stop the risk. For example, if you have a risk that someone will steal something from your house, your treatment could be that you put a padlock. You could tolerate or accept, which is I will live without putting a padlock. And then you could transfer, which is insure your household goods. If they are stolen, you ask the insurer to pay.
All right. You know, why I like this session is somehow most of the questions are spiraling back and bringing up something else. Now, I have heard that you are a livestock breeder, and I would like to inform you that a number of the people on this call have taken up initiatives in agriculture. So I'm interested, and this is an answer that comes from personal experiences, to know what are those necessary or healthy risk management practices that you've used in your livestock breeding that someone can pick up.
Like I said, we deal with risk as part of our day-to-day life. I am a budding livestock breeder, so I'm not really a subject matter expert or a poster child for livestock breeding. But some of the things I have done, I have consulted the top breeders in this country. I have visited other breeders in other countries. I have put in place, one of the ways to manage risk is processes. I've put in place certain processes before to deal with the day-to-day operations of the farm. There are many that possibly I cannot reveal, but you've got security concerns. In this country, there's a lot of theft from outside your farm. There's theft from your workers. There's disease. One of the risk management forms of known fatal livestock diseases is vaccination. The way we vaccinated against COVID, you can vaccinate livestock against most of the crazy diseases. I have managed to bring in some animals, and you can't put money on some of those animals and not vaccinate. So you see a case of a vaccine for one cow, for one disease costing 5,000, and the majority of our people will not spend that 5,000 or even 30. I mean, there's a common disease called ECF, and yet the animal is 5 million or 7 million. So it's a cost-benefit analysis, but by and large, you've got to make a determination. As you go in, like as I was going in, I did consult. What are the pitfalls of this? What are my advantages? What do I need to do? And one of the things I've been told to do is vaccinate on schedule, spray or dip on schedule, get a vet doctor to visit on schedule, a lot, okay, which is really the risk management I've applied there. And I continue to learn. There's no end to learning. So just like there's no end to learning about MTN or financial risks, there's no end to learning. There are always new barriers or frontiers, even in literally in any space. I'm involved in pharmacy, I'm involved in livestock. You have to keep reading and keep consulting. I see we are at 12 minutes short. Will guys be given a chance to ask? Hello? Has Mr. Egumire fallen off?
I'm sorry, I had just got a small network challenge, but I'm right back. I left at the point where you're sharing the healthy risk management practices, and I picked consultation, I picked setting up procedures, and I think the audience was also listening in carefully to pick up some of these. And that takes me to our next question. Are there any prominent examples?
Mr. Nyombi,
yes, please.
May I suggest that you probably pose one question, one more, and then allow the team to ask, because I see we are only left with just about 10 minutes.
Okay, the idea had been actually to pose just two more, and as going on to the first. Yes, the question was about prominent examples of, say, businesses that have failed or collapsed because of poor risk management, if you know any of this.
I guess there's litigation exposure, but I will speak about those that have been out there. Way back when we were in consulting, there were those banks in the US. They really didn't manage their credit risk. It's one of the huge risky areas in the banks. I would say it's, if you go by Bank of Uganda reports, It's probably the reason some of the banks here have also collapsed. Mismanaging the credit risk. You lend to people who are unable to pay. You don't secure the debt. And then once those companies or people fail to pay, then it hits the bank's capital. So that's one of those. There are businesses that have collapsed because they did not risk transfer. So one force majeure event wipes out the business. Again, I don't want to call out names. MTN is another example. It is resilient, but it got hit with a $5 billion penalty in Nigeria because it did not comply with a SIM card registration compliance risk. And that wiped off more than 40% of the company's value on the stock. To this date, it is bordering on hitting the high it was at 5-6 years ago before that fine. So if MTN wasn't as resilient, it probably would be no more like some of those companies. So I think those are the examples I can share. I also know personal examples of people who haven't put in place controls or processes to manage cash flow finances in a business, and their workers rob them, and before they realize the business is no more.
I see you. I've seen one question in the chat, but before I go to that, I wanted just to ask my final question on the list, being that I know you've mentioned a number of these things already, but could you give maybe a quick rundown of some of the things a business-minded person should know about risk management, like a drop-down list of the cores that one should never forget?
I would tell a business-minded person to have what we tend to track as top risks, and we report on them. We should be reporting on them on MTN. So even if they're 5, even if they're 3, look at your business and say, what can stop me from growing as I plan to? What can wipe me out? And then say, what mitigants or controls or protections have I put in place? And then you ask yourself, how do I monitor these? So if your top risk, amongst your top risks is fraud from your own staff, one of the ways you could mitigate it is bank reconciliations. So you can say, I want a bank to cash reconciliation every day or every week. Okay? Even if it's an external person, like I've said, as a business grows, you may not have on board a cashier or an accountant. There are companies that do that. So someone comes in once a week and balances the books for you. That's a way to protect yourself from your employee wiping you out, and you discover 6 months down the road, half your cash flow is gone. Okay, that's a risk mitigation measure. Okay, if you have automated, for example, MTN, we sell all our airtime and bundles, a lot of it is automated. Maybe that is not a big risk for you. Okay, so you've got to look at your business and say, this is what I'm in now. This is my growth space. What are the risks? If it is competition, like for us, we are faced with competition. I think it's obvious to everyone. We've got to watch what they do. We've got to anticipate what they will do, because if you don't, they can wipe you out. And we know of businesses that are gone because they didn't manage the competition risk. If someone sets up next to you and they are branding better, their customer service is better, you cannot, if you don't monitor that I have been serving 100 customers a day. If I have a bar, 100 customers a day, someone sets up a bar next to me, they start dropping from 100 to 80. They drop from 80 to 60. So if you're not measuring or monitoring how many customers come in, it will not be alive to you that something is wrong, okay? And you need to do something. So monitoring is core. Identify and then monitor. That's what I could say. Don't make them so many, just make them a few. Certain basics about any business. Monitor the daily revenue, monitor the reconciliations, monitor your customers. There are certain basics you can monitor, and they'll always have a pointer to risk emerging or materializing.
Right.
To the question in the chat about, I think it's pretty much saying, is it worth taking out insurance? My answer is yes. Many times, and unfortunately, yeah, you're right, there are no refunds in Uganda. But I think some insurance companies, depending, you can push them not to refund, but they reduce your subsequent premiums. So for example, for a car, if you're near to an insurer, they might say 5% of the value of the car. If you go through a year without a claim, an accident or something, then they can reduce it to 4.5 or 4%. So depending on your historical performance level, the outlay is the cost is lower, but you're protected. Your 100 million car, the highest, I believe, on motor vehicle insurance is 5%. So that's 5 million. The next year you'll pay 4 million. If you get to 4%, you pay 4 million. But your 100 million car can be wiped out when you are saving 4 million. Okay, that's just an example. We've had incidents in MTN where we have claimed close to, over 800 million, okay, when some things have happened. So there's merit in it. And sometimes it's as small as 1 to 2%, depending on the nature of the business. I know people who do micro lending, and insurance firms charge 1% for micro loans because people borrow little, pay back. And people who borrow a lot like to default. So they have priced the insurance for micro loans at 1% or less. So that 1% might not, and you factor it into your costs. So if you're determining profits of which you're paying taxes, that insurance outlay is a cost. So to my SME-based question on insurance, is it worth it? Yes, especially if you have high-risk exposures that are outside your control. There are things that are within our control. I put a system there and they signal it to the bank so they will not steal my money. But there are things outside your control. So it is akin to burying your head in the sand if you don't take out insurance. Risk assessment, I think it's basic. It's likelihood or probability and impact. Those are the two variables. There are so many other different formulae for different spaces, like credit risk in a bank. Like there are so many other complex formulae by professionals. But the simple one is the probability of the risk happening and the impact. For example, I can say MTN is in many countries and it is leaving some of them. We have a risk called political risk, which means is the environment stable enough for you to do business? So whilst that risk for Uganda was low, the risk for Syria or Yemen was high. Okay, so you might then take on political risk insurance in Yemen and Syria and not necessarily take on political risk insurance in Uganda. So it's because the probability of it happening in Uganda is low. The risk of not complying to something, the impact might be high. If they're going to give you a $5 billion fine, the impact is high. So in terms of assessment, you just think about probability of it happening and what would be the impact on my business. And then you make a decision on what to do. So that's the response to Mokalu on the formula. How best do you mitigate fraud in a business? Put in place processes. Put in place processes. If you can automate, that is using computer systems, automate. So fraud has something called a vector, the fraud risk. Now, one of those vectors is what they call opportunity. When you automate or put in place systems and processes, you don't give your employees opportunity to rob you. So you've removed the opportunity vector in the fraud triangle. You can Google fraud triangle, but what I would say is put in place processes, systems, automate and monitor. And if it happens, the magnitude will probably be low. Okay, I think that's it. Mr. Nyomi?
Thank you very much. I believe you've answered the questions very well.
Okay, I think I have answered all the questions in the chat. But I guess I'm available by email to answer any follow-through questions through you, the moderator, and the team at MTN.
Okay, I think those that will be interested in your email will be able to get it. I think I'll share it in the cohort groups, or alternatively, you could just type it out in the chat for those who are here. And
I thought they can share their questions with, I don't know if Nelson is on call. And
no, actually, they can share with me. I can forward to Nelson for that case. All right, so whoever will have a question to ask, please feel free to send it to me, you know my email, and then it will be going over to Samuel. Thank you very much, Samuel, for taking off some time today and giving us a very informative session. I just want to, I'm looking for Nelson so he can give us some closing remarks on the call. But if I can't find him, if I see Brian is on the call, if Brian wouldn't mind, it would be very nice to hear some closing remarks from him and we'll call it a day. All right, thank you, Brian. I see you're turning your microphone on.
Mr. Nyombi.
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Can you get me well?
Yes. Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you very much. Basically, me, like you should give me your email once again because I feel like I lost it. So you help me, you just give me your email. Thank you.
Okay. My email will
Okay,
be
so
like,
Sylvester, did you hear me?
I'm going to share my email in the group, but let us first hear from Mr. Brian Basa, David, if it's okay. Yes, Brian, I can get you now.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Sylvester, for hosting this. I would like to give a very big thank you to Sam for joining us and gracing us with his presence. We really appreciate, and I'm very sure everyone has picked quite a lot from the topic and the discussions that you have provided. It's not a space that is usually talked about, and I know it's always stated that most businesses, most startups do not survive their first year of start. So I think the space of risk and compliance and making sure that the business are able to manage that to survive the complicated life of entrepreneurship is very important. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you, Sylvester. Thank you, Bruno. Thank you for all the people who have been able to attend. We believe that you're changing the landscape of Uganda, and we hope to see success and listen to your stories of success as we move along in this program. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Whoever has
Nice evening.
it from my email, I'll send it in the call chats. I hope we've come to the end of our session. Have a good day, everyone. We will be back here on 5th July.
All right, thank you very much.
Kakoliki. Why?